Hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Mays, and welcome to The Creative Voice, a creativity-focused podcast exploring what being a creative person is really like. Hear from local voices in their own words in the city of Detroit.
And I'm Danny Wu, the co-host of the show.
During the day, I am the creative director and owner of Mays Multimedia.
And I'm a creative strategist and visual designer at a local marketing firm.
This series is brought to you in partnership with the Detroit chapter of the AIGA, a volunteer-based membership organization that advocates for creative professionals.
And this year, The Creative Voice will be the official podcast coverage for Design Core Detroit's Month of Design. Follow us on social for updates. This episode takes a deep dive into the work of Ivan Montoya.
It's great to have you on our show today. Reminder to everyone, this is our first episode recording live in Ivan's studio. So we are super excited to have you today. And I want to know if you can just give the audience a quick update about who you are before we start the show.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. My name is Ivan Montoya, and I'm a painter and muralist here in the city of Detroit, wonderful 313. And yeah, I paint murals, and I paint in my studio, and I'm just slinging colors all year round.
Bet. So since CCS and Illustration Academy, you have created work for Rocket Central, McKinsey Co, 1X Run, and the City of Detroit. You have also been featured by Spectrum, 3x3 Mag, and the Society of Illustrators, and have had artwork in the Guillermo del Toro Bleak House Collection, which is extremely very cool. With Murals in the Market, which is an Eastern Market, as well as gallery shows for Playground Detroit and In Contemporary, our listeners may have biked, they may have driven, or walked by your work. So tell us, Ivan, how do you determine your subject matter and location, the themes for indoor versus outdoor?
It's different every time. I think it's not something that's codified, and yeah, it's more of like I've kind of fallen into the mural work. It's kind of what's paying the bills for a lot of artists. And so, it's just painting at a larger scale. So if you have the will and like the ability to do so, then you can do it. So it's one of those things that seemed exciting. I wanted to try out. And recently, the city of Detroit, through the City Walls program, reached out, wanted me to be part of their mural residency that they have yearly.
And this is the one for this year, right?
Yeah. So actually, I'm part of the 2022 residency and finishing up this year. Murals take time. There's community involvement, especially with the City Walls program. So part of the subject matter sometimes comes along with the community I'm talking to for a particular wall location. And then other times, it's just a city-owned wall. There's no real community around it, maybe just off the freeway. I did one off I-75 North. That's just in an old elementary school, and there is a community around it, but it's kind of quiet over there. So I didn't have any community to talk to, and I was able to experiment and explore an idea. So for that, I thought about how the sun was hitting the wall. I tried to think about where the sun rises a lot when it comes to the murals, and then people would see what kind of message I'd like to give the people, especially in that location. People are leaving and entering Detroit. So what do I want them to think about? That's one aspect of it. For a lot of other walls too, I think nature has a lot to do with it. Right. I think nature plays a huge part in my studio work and in my mural work. I think nature's the thing that we can all relate to, and I think it's a nice vehicle visually, but also in regards to color and aesthetic. I think it's something that, regardless of the message, it still kind of lands. It's a beautiful thing that we can all enjoy. So nature plays a big part of it. With walls, I like to try to incorporate colors that are nearby or how someone experiences nature around this wall. And then for the studio stuff, I think that's a very long story for that. But I think when it comes to murals, the subject matter is a lot more straightforward in regards to how do I want to present the work to people that are interacting with the wall. I think that's the biggest component.
Would you say you prefer to have community feedback, being hired with the city? Do you prefer to just be like, hey, this is the wall, do your thing? Do you like the inspiration? Do you prefer to inspire your own self?
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, I think, depending. Public art is a political thing, and at least you have to acknowledge at least the people around it and the community and the history. If not, it's just going and subjecting people to your thoughts, essentially. So what I think is important, at least for murals, is to experience it, whether it be through community engagement, specifically set aside in this City Walls residency, or something I like to do is go and experience the wall and be in that area and kind of understand the people that are around it, people that walk by, people that maybe run by. I think the mural I did in the Quinter Cut is a huge example of me just existing in that space, understanding what that wall means to that specific biosphere, essentially. People will bike through it, People run through it. It's a viaduct or tunnel, if you will, in the DeQuinder Cut under the Adelaide Street near Eastern Market. And it's a cave. I like to call it the DeQuinder Cave. It's animals and these kind of human beings in transit together. When people run through it in the action of transit, they are being engulfed and encompassed and become a part of it. So that's one where I was given complete freedom, and I was able to, I think, exploit every attribute of that wall for what it gave its viewers, its passerbys. A combination, I think, of self-exploration and inspiration, as well as a little guidance always helps. Creating in a vacuum, I think, is hard. Having a little bit of a push in one direction helps.
It's not like a one-way communication, whereas I feel with indoor spaces and like gallery shows, you have a artist statement, you have a collection of items that speak to a narrative, and that is your narrative. Whether or not people react to it in that space, in that room, they're not necessarily a part of a composition, or they're not seeing it in the environment contextually. So they have to rely on the names of the pieces and the artist statement to give context to what you were thinking or feeling during that work.
Completely agreed. And I think I'm a person that likes to talk and converse and communicate with people. And coming up in a Mexican household, the conversation, the decibels were high at all times, they're just always constant back and forth. Hey, that's what I like, I think, about murals is that it's a conversation. It's always happening. People are always walking past it, driving past it, whatever it may be. At all times, I'm communicating with someone. When it comes to the studio work and the gallery work, I think I have a little more anxiety about that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's a little nerve-wracking to get to explore communication in that regard.
Yeah, even for myself, like going up and down the DeQuinder Cut, and even when I look back at the murals, I'm always just seeing something different and just observing style, kind of by like each artist, because then you see their work more and more, right? And I'm just like, oh, okay, this is where they were going, even though technically we honestly really never know what's in the mind of the artist. And I think that's what's so cool about the show, that we are like, tell us, what were you doing? Tell us. What were you thinking? Because they say, sometimes the art is in the eye of the beholder, but really is, to me, it's really, in the artist itself.
It's exciting you bring up, I think, murals also, and podcasts too. You get to hear over time, development of an artist, like the mindsets, realms that they're exploring. I go back and listen to old episodes of artists I admire or thinkers or whomever from, 2015 or 16 or whatever. And then I think I listen to other versions of them now, and they acknowledge that past person as someone else. And that's exciting. And I think murals is a good kind of window into that.
Yeah, cool. I wanted to bring this up because I was reading through some interviews and articles that cover the body of her work. And especially in Scene magazine last year, there was an emphasis on the immigrant experience and the development of folklore. That quote, you either put the mask on to try to convince yourself you are this person you're coming into the world as, or you put the mask on to maybe protect yourself in a sense. Since your debut show was based on the balance of having a Mexican and American culture, I have to ask, is there a reclaiming of self in your work? Is there a validation of making peace with a mask, or still investigating what that is and whether or not it feels stifling to you?
I feel like that's
loaded question.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely, and I think it's something a lot of us grapple with. I think the mask can manifest itself in very different ways, whether it be through language, whether it be through code switching, whether it be through how you dress, whether it be through, just generally how you express yourself. It's an ongoing conversation. I don't think it's ever ending. And for my work then, I think it was more like getting some thoughts out, I think, that I've had throughout the years. And I think I've been able to articulate more as I'm growing as a creative professional, as maybe more literate person, processing these thoughts through the paintings. And I think it was coinciding with the world also doing that. I think there's always a sense of reclaiming of yourself. I am my own filter. A lot of artists can relate to that. So anything that I'm painting or trying to get out, especially when it comes with studio work, it's self-motivated. I have to look inward to find these images, these stories, these narratives. And maybe I disguise them through entirely separate narratives that don't involve me, involve these characters that are playing out or acting out some of my thoughts in a more kind of theatrical way. So yeah, there's a reclaiming of self mainly through the act of finding ideas and painting them. I have my own experiences, and that experience is a kind of Mexican-American experience, and processing stories that maybe I've experienced firsthand or have heard. Processing those results in these pictures, I think. So yes, there's a reclaiming, but it's not always intentional. I think I'm just looking for ideas and looking for things that feel important and feel like they have to be painted.
And what's so cool, because the question I was about to ask you that pulled together in my mind while just looking at you and also listening to the very end of your statement, we have an advantage, Danny and I, and some of the viewers who have already seen your work, right? And I'm sitting in your studio right now and I'm looking at various pieces. And for the listener, how would you describe your style of work, your aesthetic? Can you give me vocally a visualization for the listener when it comes down to your work and even maybe the hues? Because when I'm looking at your work, and this is something that I do, I am not a proclaimed artist. I don't consider myself that just yet, but I do a little painting, and I know that a lot of the times when it comes down to painting, your medium and the particular substrate you use down to the type of paint that you use says a lot about the delivery and the passion and what you're creating. I'm seeing really bright hues of, red. The green has so many different hues.
Yeah. I think I always like telling myself and maybe other people that I'm painting flavors for your eyes. I'm always thinking about food. And I think a lot of the viewers can agree to that. Just constantly snagging and thinking about food. And I think when I'm painting, it feels almost like this act of making salsa or making a dish. There's all these colors and flavors and spices, and one color adds a little bit more spice, but you don't want too much, right? So I think my paintings, in a sense, feel like a dish. And the ingredients, in a sense, I use a lot of like Mesoamerican folklore, whether it be like the jaguar as a repeated motif in my pieces, mainly because it represents, kind of this animal that exists nocturnally, but also during the day, and represents like a warrior spirit of sorts. I also have a lot of nature landscapes, they feel kind of deserty in a sense. Because I'm from Chihuahua. I was born in Chihuahua, and Chihuahua's desert. It's the northernmost state of Mexico, so there's a lot of dust, a lot of hills. It's near the Copper Canyon. I like to introduce lighting into my pieces, so most of the times there's set golden hour or like peak of day, really hot light. When I look into my thoughts, I feel the heat of like the Chihuahuan sun, and like that's always kind of a nostalgic thing for me.
I see that.
And I want to kind of bring that heat out, visually, whether it be through like subtle temperature changes and the colors. And I also think texture and the ability to make something feel handcrafted is important to me too. There's like a artisan handcrafted aspect to it. I'm not too worried about if it's a perfect surface quality. If the panel has a slight little like corner that's not as sharp as the rest, I'm okay with that. I always think of like going to the little markets with the artisan handmade stuff in Mexico, and there's so much charm in something that's handmade, and I think I want to bring that through. In regards to like how the figures are interacting, it's almost like you're glimpsing into a moment where you may be able to draw some conclusions from their body language, maybe the way they're looking at each other or not looking at each other, the way they're crammed into spaces. A lot of the Mesoamerican inspiration I have is through composition. I think about these hieroglyphs or these, carvings on the sides of pyramids or these ancient structures and how they're kind of formatted into squares. I like cramping things within the format of the panel.
I noticed that because like even when I stand here and I look at a few of the paintings that are in front of me, I feel like my proximity to the subject is if I was there, which makes it feel so much more tangible. And also it helps to bring the realization of even the details of this truck in front of me, looking at the light from the girl, I can actually see her ear and the way her hair is blowing in this direction that maybe this vehicle is in movement. I want to inspire them to go look at it and not just listen. Yeah.
No, and I think something I'd like to toss in there too is that I think my work's gone from more of a magical realm more into grounded in realism. So yeah, it's more of like a symbolism kind of thing. I've gone from like mythical to more of like a symbolist kind of world, but not sure. I'm figuring it out. I'm battling with the expectations of what the contemporary art world wants. What I want to paint, trying to navigate a market.
Which is quite all right because at the end of the day, you win. So Detroit Art Review described your painterly style as reminiscent of mid-20th century Mexican painters like Diego Rivera or Jose Clemente or Bosco. But you also cite artists like Rufino Tamayo, Jorge Gonzalez Camarena. And what influences do these artists have on you, and also different motifs that you use, such as like Mayan and Aztec?
There's a lot of other artists that I left out in that interview. I just learned the other day about this Mexican female muralist who was born in Chihuahua that I just realized was around. There was like a huge powerhouse of female muralists at the time. I just overlooked these because of the nature of Mexican culture at that time specifically. super powerful. The ones specifically referenced, I think, popularized Mexican muralism. And I think because of that, I am navigating in that medium too. And I think that's something I have to acknowledge. Diego Rivera specifically, huge for Detroit. Diego and Frida and their time here in the DIA, and I'm acknowledging that. I want to add to that history of Mexican muralists in Detroit. I'm inspired by that history. I'm inspired by what they were trying to do in regards to like social change in Mexico. So I'm inspired by how they affected people and their thoughts. But, Rufino Tamayo specifically, he was more of a humanist in a sense. He wanted to paint things for the human experience, not specifically for one political agenda. Rivera and some of his contemporaries were very communist and specific things they were trying to get across in their pieces. Whereas Rufino Tamayo was looking to the stars, was looking at the interior human experience. That was huge for me. So when I paint, I feel like I'm trying to acknowledge subtleties in what we experience as humans, whether it be like longing or mourning the death of someone, whether it be experiencing the qualities of nature. Those are all very tangible things that, regardless of who you are, we can talk about. Rufino Tamayo and his work, I think, really brought that out. As in regards to Jorge Gonzalez Camarena, I think visually and aesthetically, the amount of color and richness that he brought to his murals, I think that's something I want to bring to. Saturnino Aran, who's a classically trained painter, he died too young. He was, I think, 33 when he passed. He went and studied. He was a really huge fan of, Frank Brangwyn and some European muralists in that kind of aesthetic of that time, where it was like Dean Cornwell, and these are some real nerdy
the
kind
golden
of like,
age.
Yeah. It's a real nerdy deep dive illustration of painting history. But I love Saturnino's work, and it seemed as though he was just painting humans for the sake of the human experience too. The fact that he passed at such a young age, I think, makes me want to carry on the narratives and stories and kind of visual that he was painting at the time. There's so much cool visual snacks in the Mesoamerican and South American mythology, inspired by nature, and they talked with nature and to nature and for nature. And so I think that's where I take some of those motifs I want to incorporate. The painting I have in front of me, there's two figures in a truck bed, but there's a jaguar between them.
Yes.
And it's like, what's the jaguar there? Or is it representing someone? Is it representing an emotion? Is it representing something they're carrying along with them? And where are they going? There's that embedding of nature in these kind of figurative plays, I think, is important because we exist alongside nature, not against it. It's not here for us. We are here with it.
Gotcha.
And they'll be here long before and after we're gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gentle reminder.
I know, it's like I think I dwell on mortality too much.
Yeah,
but
Danny ain't lying, folks.
That was part 1 with our interview with Ivan Montoya, and click below for part 2 of The Creative Voice.